But
The
the
station
discovery
was alive
only
with
raised
noise,
more
voices
questions than
colliding,
answered.
luggage
Hale had been
wheels
dead for at
rattling
least
against the
20
concrete,
years.
an
Forensic
announcement
tests
breaking through in
suggested the truck
fragments
had
no
gone
one
into the
really
creek
heard.
around
Yet,
1999,
in the middle of the
long
restless
before
crowd,
Lena's
she stood
disappearance
still.
or any of the
Her
recent
fingers
sightings.
gripped the handle
If
of
that
a
was
small
true,
suitcase,
then who had been
knuckles
walking near the
pale,
creek
as
just
if letting
months
go would mean
earlier,
losing more
looking
than just the
exactly
weight
like
of
him?
clothes
Who had been living
inside?
in that shack
A red
and
scarf
leaving
dangled
behind
loosely
new
from her
maps and
wrist,
photos?
its threads
The
fraying,
evidence no
catching
longer
the gusts
pointed
of
to a
cold
single
air
man.
that slipped through
It
the
hinted at
sliding
something
doors every
larger,
time someone
something that
entered.
had continued
It was not
long
wrapped around
after
her
Hale's
neck where it
death.
belonged. It
Investigators
swung
found a
like a
small
warning, a
notebook in
tether,
the
or
truck's
a
glove
memory she could
compartment.
not
Its
untie.
pages
The
swollen
crowd
from water
rushed
damage,
by,
but
brushing
still
shoulders,
partially
never
readable.
stopping to look.
Most of the entries
But
were
her
lists
gaze
of
stayed
hunting
fixed,
routes
sharp,
and survival
searching
notes.
on something
But near the
beyond
back
them,
were several
or perhaps
pages
on
filled
someone.
with disturbing
Her
drawings,
lips parted
sketches
slightly,
of
as if
faces,
she might call
some
a name,
smiling,
but
some
no
screaming.
sound left her
They
mouth.
matched the
Only her
likenesses
breath,
of the
fast and
missing
shallow,
people connected to
fogged
the
the
creek
glass in
over
front
the
of her.
years.
She
The last
pressed her
page
palm
held
against
only a
it, and
few
for a
shaky
moment the
lines
reflection
written in
stared
faded
back,
ink. He won't let
eyes
me
rimmed with
leave the woods.
sleeplessness,
No one
strands of
knew who
hair
he
caught
referred
against her
to,
cheek.
but the
The
writing appeared to
reflection didn't
belong to
lie.
Hale himself.
She was trembling.
Experts
The
debated
loudspeaker
whether
called
Hale
for
had been
departures,
manipulated by
numbers,
someone
and gates.
else or had
Yet
fallen
she heard
victim to
only
his
the
own
ticking
delusions.
inside her pocket.
Some believe
A
that
cracked
another
watch,
person,
its face
perhaps an
broken,
accomplice or
hands
someone
frozen at a
inspired by
time
him,
that no
had
longer moved
continued his
forward.
grim legacy.
She carried it
Others
everywhere,
thought Hale's
though it
obsession
could
had
not tell
drawn
her where
someone
she
new
was,
to the
nor
area,
where she should go.
someone who wanted to carry on what
Someone
he started.
brushed past
After
her
the
shoulder.
truck's discovery,
She
the
flinched,
woods were
eyes
sealed
darting.
off
For
permanently.
half a second,
Yet,
she thought she
even
saw
as time
him.
passed,
Shadows
people
dressed in
continued to
familiar
report
outlines,
strange sights,
posture like a
flickers of
half-remembered
light
ache.
deep among the trees,
But when she blinked, the
faint
shape was
voices
gone,
near the creek,
swallowed by the
and
moving
sometimes
crowd.
a
Her
figure
heart
standing
stumbled in
motionless
her
at the water's
chest.
edge.
"Don't
No one
look
ever
back,"
proved
she
who
whispered,
or what it
though
was.
she wasn't
The
sure if she
mystery
meant
of
it for
Lena
herself
Morrison
or the
and the
ghost she
others
kept
remained
chasing.
unsolved.
The scarf
Willow
slipped from her
Creek
wrist
grew
and fell to the
quieter
ground,
than ever,
caught
but the
under
fear
rushing feet.
never truly
She bent to
disappeared.
retrieve it,
On
hands
foggy
shaking,
nights,
but when she
when the
rose,
wind
she
moved
felt
through the
it,
trees
an
just
invisible
right,
pull,
some still
as though the
claimed to
air
hear
itself
footsteps
leaned
by the
closer to
creek
her.
and the
Somewhere
whisper
near
of
the
a
edge of the
voice calling out
platform,
from the
a
darkness.
man stood with
A
his
reminder
coat
that
collar
whatever
raised
happened there
high.
was never really over.
His suitcase barely touched the ground. He didn't move, not like the others. He was waiting. And though she couldn't see his face clearly, the weight of his stillness locked onto her like a mark. The train roared in, screeching, drowning every sound, every thought. People pushed forward, impatient. She clutched the scarf to her chest, the cracked watch pressed hard in her palm. Her eyes lifted once more, searching, daring. And in the blur of steam and steel, the moment felt like a beginning she had not chosen, yet could no longer escape. The train's whistle echoed through the station, yet she didn't move. Her suitcase rested against her leg, heavier than it should have been for what little it carried. It wasn't the clothes that weighed her down. It was the history folded inside, stitched into the lining, pressed between every shirt and faded piece of paper. Her fingers brushed the cracked watch again, as if to steady herself. She could almost hear her father's voice, years younger than she remembered him, bent over his workbench where timepieces lay in neat rows. A clock can break, but the hands still remember where they stopped. Time always leaves its mark, even when it refuses to move. He had pressed the watch into her palm before everything fell apart, before silence replaced the steady ticking of his lessons. She blinked hard, forcing the memory back, but it clung to her, just like the scarf. It wasn't hers originally. Her mother had worn it once, bright against the winter wind. The edges were frayed now, the red dulled, but wrapped around her wrist it was still the only warmth she carried that wasn't fleeting. Around her, the station pulsed with life. Families collided in embraces, laughter spilling into the cold air. A child ran ahead of his mother, dragging a stuffed bear by its ear. Lovers leaned into each other, one whispering a promise before boarding. She watched it all, her heart tightening with every smile that wasn't meant for her. Her own arms remained empty. She shifted her weight, as though ready to step forward at last, but her shoes anchored her in place. She wasn't just traveling, she was escaping. The bills at the apartment stacked like unanswered letters. Her job fading into silence after too many days she couldn't bring herself to show up. No one had asked why. No one had noticed the slow unraveling. Except perhaps him. The man with the raised collar still hadn't moved. While the crowd surged, he stood in the same place, suitcase untouched, gaze steady. She felt it before she saw it. His eyes on her, unwavering, quiet. It wasn't the careless glance of a stranger brushing past. It was something slower, deliberate. Like he had been waiting for this moment. For her. Her throat tightened. She clutched the scarf tighter, the watch pressing its broken glass into her skin. The announcer's voice cracked overhead. Final boarding, track 7. The words sliced through her hesitation. She took a step, then another. The train hissed open, doors breathing out warm air. But when she reached the edge of the platform, she stopped. Her reflection in the dark glass stared back, uncertain, fragile. Behind her, she thought she caught the faintest shift. The man lowering his collar, the edge of a smile, or maybe just a trick of light. Her hand hovered in midair, suspended between leaving and turning back. And in that pause, the air itself seemed to wait with her. The train doors yawned open with a hiss, but she couldn't step inside. Her hand hovered in the air, fingers curled tight around the red scarf, as if its frayed threads might whisper the choice she couldn't make. Behind her, the station shifted, voices colliding, footsteps scattering, and yet she felt the stillness of one gaze pinning her in place. She turned slightly, and there he was. The man. His coat collar lowered now, revealing a face that didn't belong to the noise of the station. Weathered lines etched his skin, not from age but from a life spent enduring too much. His shoes told the same story, worn at the edges, soles patched with care but ready to give way. The suitcase at his side bore scratches like old scars, each mark earned from places he never wanted to return to. When he reached into his coat, her chest tightened, but it wasn't a weapon he pulled. It was a wallet, frayed along the seams. A photo peeked out, edges curled, colors fading. From her distance she couldn't see clearly, but she caught the shape. A child's face, smiling wide, holding onto someone just outside the frame. The man's thumb brushed the photo gently, reverently, before slipping it back inside. Her breath hitched. It was like staring into a mirror she didn't ask for. His silence carried the same weight as hers. Loss stitched into every movement. Loneliness, standing straight but fragile. She wondered if he, too, had once pressed a keepsake against his chest, the way she clutched the cracked watch and her mother's scarf. Thunder grumbled outside, the first heavy drops of rain tapping the glass roof above the platform. The storm rolled in, echoing the conflict gnawing at her chest. She had a train to catch, a life to abandon, debts and ghosts she wanted to outrun. And yet here he stood, unshaken by the rush. His eyes tethering her like invisible wire. Her mind screamed, "Leave. This isn't yours. Whatever story he carries, don't touch it." But her heart murmured differently. She recognized the tremor in his jaw, the way his fingers lingered on the photo as if it were the last thing holding him together. It was the same tremor she felt every morning when she opened her empty apartment door. The whistle cut through the station, final call. People shoved past, hurrying aboard, their lives in motion while hers hung suspended. She took one step toward the train, scarf brushing her wrist. Then stop. The man lifted his gaze to hers, steady, unreadable. Rain streamed down the glass, blurring the world into streaks of gray. For a heartbeat it felt like fate, for another like a trap. And she couldn't yet tell the difference. She moved with the crowd, step by step, almost convincing herself she was leaving. The train's metal breath poured warm air onto her skin, and for a moment she let it push her forward. Her suitcase wheels scraped against the platform. Her scarf fluttered loose at her wrist. She was close, so close, to stepping into the carriage, to closing the chapter without ever opening it. But then she looked back. Her chest clenched as though invisible hands had reached inside and pulled her still. The man hadn't moved. He stood rooted where she had first seen him, a quiet anchor in the storm of movement. His eyes found her again, steady, waiting. It wasn't demand. It wasn't plea. It was something more dangerous. Recognition. Her knees weakened, a tremor climbing her spine. She turned quickly, hiding her face as tears stung, but the scarf slipped, tumbling to the ground. She froze, unable to bend for it, as if retrieving it would mean acknowledging what tied her there. And then he moved. Slow, deliberate steps through the rushing crowd. A few passengers muttered under their breath, irritated that he disrupted their path. One woman whispered to her child, tugging him closer, "Don't stare, darling." Their judgment landed sharp, like invisible arrows. Society always watching, never asking. The man bent, lifting the scarf gently from the ground. He held it differently than she ever had, not as fabric, but as memory. The red threads dangled from his hand, frayed yet whole. When he reached her, he didn't force it back into her grasp. He simply let it hover between them. His voice was low, almost a murmur drowned by the rain on the glass roof. "Some people carry more than just bags," he said, his tone frayed like his shoes. "They carry silence." Her breath shook. The scarf trembled between them, her hand inches from it, but she couldn't take it. She wanted to ask him who he carried, who the photo belonged to, why his stillness felt like a mirror. But the words died before they could escape. A guard called out, "Miss, if you're boarding now." His eyes flicked to her with impatience, to the man with faint suspicion. She felt the weight of that judgment, too, the way people always wrote stories about you before you ever told them. Her suitcase handle trembled in her grip. She could leave. She should leave. Yet her eyes lingered on his hand, on the red scarf suspended like a bridge between two broken clocks. One last look. One last hesitation. And in that fragile pause, the world seemed to bend closer, waiting for her to choose. The scarf still hovered between them when the whistle blared one last warning. She should have stepped forward, but instead she lifted her eyes, and caught the glint of something in his other hand. It wasn't just the wallet this time. A cracked watch. Her cracked watch. Her breath left her in a ragged gasp. He held it with careful fingers, as if it might crumble at his touch. She knew she hadn't dropped it, yet there it was, resting in his palm like it had always belonged there. Her voice cracked. "How?" He didn't answer, only turned the face toward her. The glass reflected the station's lights, fractured and cold. For a heartbeat, it looked alive again, ticking where it should have been frozen. A chill rippled down her arms. A clock can break, but the hands still remember where they stopped. Her father's words echoed back, the lesson she had carried and buried. And now, standing in the stranger's hand, the watch no longer felt like hers. It felt like a message. But her heart murmured, but his grip didn't yield. She recognized the tremor in his held hers, the way his fingers lingered on the photo. "It belonged to my daughter once," holding him together. Voice it was the same tremor she felt every morning when she opened her empty apartment door. She whistled cut through the station, desperate final for cracks, for lies. People shoved past, but instead she found something worse. Their lives in motion, the scarf in his other hand, the watch in this one. She took one step toward the train, past colliding with his in ways that made no sense. Then stopped. Yet cut the man lifted his gaze to hers. Her knees wavered, steady, unreadable. If she stepped back, rain streamed down the glass. The PA system droned another into streaks of gray. Words blurred. For a heartbeat, she barely heard the guard mutter. For another, like a trap. And she couldn't yet tell the difference. His tone carried the judgment of the world. Step by step. "Hurry up, almost convincing herself she was leaving. Don't question fate." The train's metal breath poured warm air onto her skin. The man lowered his gaze for a moment. And for a moment she let it push her forward, almost to himself. Her suitcase wheels scraped against the platform. Close. Her scarf fluttered loose at her wrist. The living. She was close. Something inside her cracked. To stepping into the carriage, to closing the chapter without ever opening it. She had spent years trying to disappear. But then she looked back, letting unpaid bills, her chest clenched as though invisible hands had reached inside and pulled her still. Silence the man had her refuge. Now it felt like a grave. Rooted where she had first seen on the suitcase, a quiet anchor in the storm of standing by the platform edge. His eyes found her again, moved before her mind agreed. It wasn't her past the train doors, it wasn't past the crowd. It was something more dangerous. His eyes flickered, unreadable. Her knees but weakened, no longer a tremor climbing her spine. And when he turned toward the far corridor of the station, hiding her face as tears stung. Every step felt irreversible, tumbling to the ground. She wasn't just leaving a train behind, unable to bend for it. She was walking into a room she couldn't mean acknowledging what tied her there. Where everything would change. And then he moved. The night had emptied the deliberate steps through the rushing crowd. No one would remember the woman who muttered under their breath, or the man who
irritated
sat
that
with
he
a scarf
disrupted their
folded
path.
neatly beside him.
One woman whispered
She walked
to her
alone
child,
now,
tugging him
city
closer.
streets slick
"Don't
with rain,
stare, darling."
lamps scattering
Their
light
judgment
across
landed
puddles.
sharp, like
Her
invisible
suitcase
arrows.
was gone.
But her
Society
steps
always
felt lighter
watching,
without
never
it.
asking.
For once,
The man
she
bent,
didn't look over her
lifting the
shoulder.
scarf gently
At a
from
corner
the ground.
cafe,
Shutters half
he
drawn.
held it differently
She
than
paused
she
to
ever
watch a
had.
boy press his
Not
forehead
as
to the
fabric,
window,
but as memory.
waiting for someone
The
inside.
red threads
A
dangled
moment
from
later,
his hand.
his mother
Frayed
emerged,
yet
and
whole.
he ran to her.
When he reached
Laughter
her,
echoing in the
he
dark
didn't
street.
force it back into
She
her
smiled
grasp.
faintly,
He
not
simply
with
let
envy,
it hover between
but with
them.
a quiet acceptance.
His voice was
Some
low,
arms were meant to
almost
hold
a
you,
murmur drowned
others
by the
never
rain on the
would.
glass roof.
Back in her small
Some people
apartment,
carry more than
she
just
placed
bags,
the key on the
he
table
said.
and let the
His
silence
tone
frayed
stretch.
like his shoes.
No longer pressed
They
in
carry
like before.
silence. Instead,
Her
it
breath
felt
shook.
like space,
The
room to
scarf
breathe.
trembled between them.
She moved to
Her
the
hand
drawer where she
inches from
kept
it,
what little
but
she
she
had
couldn't
refused
take
to
it.
lose.
She wanted to ask
Inside
him
lay a
who he
handful
carried,
of papers,
who the
a
photo
broken
belonged
pen,
to,
and
why
the
empty
empty
stillness
spot where the
felt like a
cracked
mirror.
watch used to be.
But the words
She
died
traced
before
that
they could
space
escape.
with her finger.
A guard
As
called
though
out,
honoring a wound
"Miss,
that
if
had
you're
finally
boarding
begun
now."
to close.
The
His
scarf
eyes
was gone
flicked to
too,
her with
left
impatience.
To
But
the
in
man
her
with
mind it
faint
rested
suspicion.
beneath a softer
She
light.
felt the weight of
No
that
longer
judgment
a chain,
too.
but a farewell.
The way people always
Her
wrote
father's
stories
voice
about you
drifted
before
back,
you ever told
softer
them.
than memory.
Her suitcase
more
handled
like recognition
recognition.
in her grip.
Sometimes
She could
love
leave.
is not romance.
She should leave.
It's
Yet her
recognition.
eyes lingered on his
She
hand.
let the words linger.
On the red scarf,
the truth
suspended
of them
like a
finally
bridge between
steadying
two
her
broken
instead
clocks.
of breaking her.
One last
She stood
look.
by the window,
One last
rain
tapping
hesitating
gently against the glass.
and in that fragile
and
pause,
breathed in the scent
the
of
world
wet
seemed
earth
to
and
bend
electricity.
closer.
Waiting
The world
for her
outside
to choose.
moved on.
The scarf
Cars
still
humming,
hovered
people
between
hurrying,
them when the whistle
stories
blared
beginning
one
without
last
her.
warning.
And yet
She
should
felt
have
part
stepped
of it
forward,
now, not
but
apart
instead
from it.
she lifted her eyes.
Her reflection met
and
her
caught
gaze.
the glint of something
And
in
for
his
the
other
first
hand.
time it didn't
It
look
wasn't
like a
just the
stranger.
wallet this time.
She whispered to
Cracked
herself,
watch.
not a vow
Her
but a
cracked
release.
watch.
Her
Silence
breath
left
doesn't
her
have to
in a
bury me
ragged
anymore.
gasp. And then she let the
He held
quiet
it with
return,
careful fingers,
not as weight,
as if it
but
might
as a
crumble at
companion.
his touch.
The night
She knew
deepened.
she hadn't dropped
Somewhere,
it.
yet
A train
there it was,
rattled along
resting
tracks
in
she
his
had
palm
chosen
like
not
it had
to
always
follow.
belonged there.
Somewhere,
Her
a
voice
man
cracked.
sat with a broken
How?
watch and a red scarf.
He didn't
Holding
answer,
on in his
only
own way.
turned the face
She
toward
didn't
her.
know if their
The
paths
glass
would cross
reflected the
again.
station's lights.
She didn't need
fractured
to,
and
because
cold.
not all
For a
stories end with
heartbeat,
answers.
it looked alive
Some
again,
end with space,
ticking where
for
it should have been
questions,
frozen.
for breath, for change.
A chill rippled
and
down
maybe
her
that
arms.
is enough. A clock can break, but the hands still remember where they stopped. Her father's words echoed back, the lesson she had carried and buried. And now, standing in the stranger's hand, the watch no longer felt like hers. It felt like a message.